Thank you. Jan and I went up to Gainesville this week to our grandson's 8th grade graduation. It was good, just a lot of people there. And, you know, over the years, I've been to so many graduations and heard so many commencement speeches. And, you know, everybody's extraordinary and everybody in the room is a leader and everybody's going to change the world. And I've often thought that normal is underrated, that, you know, it's just normal folks that go through their everyday doing what they do, that is what it's really about. So today's sermon is about being normal, and it's okay. In fact, it's a good thing to just be kind of a regular, ordinary kind of person. I hope you're not offended by that. And I'll begin with a funny story. It's an old one about the young preacher who first arrived out in the country church, and he'd never done a funeral before, but he was asked to take this funeral, and it was out in the country, and he didn't have GPS, and he got incredibly lost, but he finally saw them there in the field. They were digging the hole for the service, and so he comes up, he gets out of his car, goes and stands on this pile, and there's just a few people there, and he preaches his heart out. In fact, he hears a couple amens, so he goes from Genesis to Revelation, about 40 minutes. And when he finishes, he feels really good about himself, and he starts walking away, and he overhears one of the guys saying, you know, in all the years I've been putting in septic tanks, I've never heard anything like that. And I guess what I want to say is sometimes even we religious folks want to make something overly, you know, there when it's just, you know, doing what's regular and right to do. And so the book of Proverbs is really a helpful thing. It's because it's ordinary, normal people just doing what they've learned over the years. And so I'm going to read a couple verses from the book of Proverbs, whatever chapter it is. By insolence the heedless make strife, but wisdom is with those who take advice. Wealth hastily gotten will dwindle. Those who gather little by little will increase it. Just good common sense. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. It does, doesn't it? But a desire fulfilled is a tree of life. Those who despise the word bring destruction on themselves, but those who respect the commandment will be rewarded. The teaching of the wise is a fountain of life, so that one may avoid the snares of death. Good sense wins favor, but the way of the faithless is their ruin. The clever do all things intelligently, but the fool displays folly. And one of you wrote to me and said, you know, a neat thing about normal is that it's not perfect. It's not worry-free or without pain and suffering. There are joys and sorrows, birth and death. Life is messy. Normal is graduation, family dynamics, good intentions. It's the ebb and flow of life, the seasons of the year. And then this really brings it home in my view. This person says, first of all, I never thought normal could feel so good. For the past 2 weeks or so, I've felt like a normal person, acted like a normal person, and actually looked like a normal person. It has been fabulous. My oncologist allowed me to postpone my chemo start date until after our family takes a vacation, which has afforded me extra time to heal from all my surgeries. It's incredibly thrilling to not be on any type of medication, but also to not wake up worried about how I'm going to feel each day. Thank you, Lord, for this gift of time. Feeling good has allowed me to do so many things I've missed during the past few months. I was able to experience my middle son's baseball World Series where his team ended in second place with a final score of 14-13. It was an exciting series, and I absolutely loved watching him play. Normal can be a pretty good thing. Jesus talked about this. He used a lot of wise teaching. In fact, he tells this, there's this story in Matthew's gospel. In fact, I'll read it. It's from the 12th chapter. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. When the Pharisees saw, they said to him, look, your disciples are doing what's not lawful to do on the Sabbath. He said to them, have you not read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which was not lawful for him or his companions to eat, but only for the priests. Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple break the Sabbath and yet are guiltless? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. But if you'd known what this means, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. He left that place and entered their synagogue. A man was there with a withered hand, and they asked him, is it lawful to cure on the Sabbath? What a strange question. So that they might accuse him, he said to them, suppose one of you had only one sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath. Will you not lay hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a human being than a sheep? So it's lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Then he said to the man, stretch out your hand. He stretched it out and it was restored as sound as the other. But the Pharisees didn't like it. They went out and conspired against him how to destroy him. Do you see how the normal, natural thing that Jesus was going to do could get so distorted? So bound up by this law. And you can understand it after the exile, after the diaspora, after they were shipped off to Babylon. They lost their temple, they lost their homeland, they lost almost everything. The only two things they had to help their identity were the law and the Sabbath. The law and the Sabbath, and the very gifts of God that gave to them, they made them like God. We do that. They made them like God so that the 10 laws became 600 laws, and the Sabbath, which was a gift of God to show rest, they made it so rule-driven that it was illegal in their mind to heal somebody and to do good on the Sabbath. And sometimes we can get things so distorted. So a woman taken in adultery, she should be stoned. No. It's normal to extend grace, as Jesus did. The woman at the well, it's abnormal to not have conversation, and Jesus had conversation. The shepherd, it's normal to go after the one that's lost. It's normal for the woman to tear up the house, to find that precious coin. Normal to wise to build a house on the rock. So today I want to talk about what it means for us to be normal. It's just an affirmation of what you do every day. Normal, ordinary, spiritual kind of life. As Jan and I are getting ready to leave, by the way, Corey came this week. Reverend Corey came this past Thursday. Staff loved him. It was really great. Met with several leaders. It's going to be really great. So Jan and I are packing up, and I've had the chance to go through my files that I hadn't done all these years. Since I only work one day a week, I've had this chance to go through the file. It's kind of like, when you're getting ready to go on a trip, and you look in your refrigerator and your freezer, and you think, well, I got to throw away some of this stuff, but a lot of this stuff I'm not going to get rid of. I'm going to throw this out on you. And so that's what I'm doing. I found these files, and back in 2008, Tim Russert died. Any of you remember Tim Russert? Tim Russert was the longest running host to Meet the Press. 16 years he hosted it. I never watched it because I was always in church on Sunday, but he must have been an unusual guy. I remember reading his book about Father's Day, about fathers. It was called Big Russ and Me, Fathers and Son, Lessons of Life, Wisdom of Our Fathers. And Peggy Noonan writes in the Wall Street Journal, I found this in my file, they were amazed at how much coverage, 4 days of coverage of this man who was there in Meet the Press in the Washington circles. He said the beautiful thing about the coverage was that it offered extremely important information to the ages 15 or 20 or 30 who may not have been told on how to operate in a world beyond go succeed. I'm not sure we tell the young as much as we ought, as clearly as we ought, what it is the world admires and what it is they want to emulate. Peggy Noonan goes on to say, in a way, the world's a great liar. It tells you it worships and admires money, but at the end of the day, it doesn't. It says it adores fame and celebrity, but it doesn't, not really. The world admires and wants to hold on to and not lose goodness. It admires virtue. At the end, it gives its greatest tributes to generosity, honesty, courage, mercy, talents well used. Talents that brought into the world make it better. That's what it really admires. That's what we talk about in eulogies. Because that's what's important. We don't say, hey, the thing about Joe was he was rich. We say, if we can, the thing about Joe was he took care of people. And so after Tim Russert's death, the entire television media for 4 days told you the keys to a life well lived, the things you actually need to live life well, and without which it won't be good. Among them are taking care of those you love, letting them know they're loved, which involves self-sacrifice, holding firm to God, to your religious faith, no matter how high you rise or how low you fall. This involves guts, self-discipline, active attention to developing and refining a conscience to whose promptings you can respond, honoring your calling or profession by trying to do within it honorable work takes effort, willingness to master the ethics of your field. Tim Russert had these virtues. They were great to see. Then she goes on to say, one of the greatest statements, the most piercing, was something Chuck Todd said when he talked on a panel on MSNBC. He was asked more or less why Tim stuck out from the pack, and he said he was normal. That's what he said. Now she says this. I don't say this, although I think it. In a city, Washington, in which many powerful people are deep down weird. Now, you Republicans or Democrats, I'm not picking on either one. This is a lot of people up there. Deep down weird or don't have a deep down, only a surface. Tim was normal. Like a normal man, he cared about his family and his profession and his faith. Tim's normality is becoming the exception. Tim came from a loving home. Grew up in a house in a suburb. He went to private Catholic schools. His father was a garbage man, which when I was growing up was known as a good municipal union job. Tim's life was as good as 90% of his countrymen in his time. His background wasn't strange or surprising. It was normal. And then from my file, 2000, the year 2000. Some of you weren't born yet, but this is Irma Bombeck. I didn't know she wrote 15 books. Had a newspaper column in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. She said, if I had to live my life over, I would have gone to bed when I was sick instead of pretending the earth would go into a holding pattern if it weren't there for a day. I would have burned the pink candle sculpted like a rose before it melted in the storage attic. I would have talked less and listened more. I would have seized the moment. Remember all those women on the Titanic who waved off the dessert cart? I would have invited friends over to dinner, even if the carpet was stained, the sofa faded. I still have to clean the house before they come over, though, in our house. I would have taken the time to listen to my grandfather ramble about his youth. I hope my grandkids are watching this later. I would have never insisted the car windows be rolled up on a summer day because my hair had just been teased and sprayed. I would have sat on the lawn with my children and not worried about grass stains. I would have cried and laughed less while watching television and more while watching life. When my kids kissed me impetuously, I would never have said, later, now go get washed up for dinner. There would have been more I love yous, more I'm sorries. But mostly, given another shot at life, I would see his every minute and look at it and really see it, live it, never give it back. I can't remember if I told you about the father who was 30 and his child was 3, daughter was 3 years old. They were in the grocery store. Do you remember this? So they're 30, and he's going to the grocery store. He has to take her with him. And so she's in the shopping cart, and he's looking at the cereal or the condiments or something. And he hears this enormous crash because his daughter had gotten up in the cart and wiped out the whole row of jars of pickles. Then they all crashed to the floor and made this ginormous mess. And he contemplates sort of walking away from that daughter and going out the side door and never coming back. Anybody ever done that? 15 years later, he's 45 and she's 18, and he and his wife are sitting at the couch weeping. They just read this note from their 18-year-old, or it could have been 15 or 13 or 12. It said, "I hate you. I hate you. You've ruined my life. I want to get out of here and never come back." And then 15 years later, he's 60 and she's 33. And they're out jogging together on a cool morning. And they come to an intersection, and she's sort of slightly ahead of him, and she puts her arm out to make sure she has a chance to check the traffic before they enter the intersection. All of that's normal. Even the "I hate you, and I don't want to ever be around you again." Normal. Eugene Peterson, who wrote The Message, a paraphrase of the Bible. Many of you love that. I love it. It's amazing. He would hold up in his Montana lake home and translate the Bible, paraphrase. He was working in Isaiah, and Bono from U2 became a fan of his. And Bono showed up one day to meet this great man of the Scriptures, wrote 30 books. And his wife, Peterson's wife, went out to meet Bono and said, "Well, you're going to have to wait a little bit. He's working on Isaiah." And somebody later said to Peterson, "Well, wait a minute. Bono showed up. And you had to make him wait to go see him?" He said, "Look, it's Bono or Isaiah." And so he stayed with Isaiah for quite a while. But in an interview with Christianity Today, he said, most people assume that spirituality has to do mainly with a feeling. And it does, but it's mainly following Jesus and doing the stuff you do as a follower of Jesus. He said, if you read the saints, they're pretty ordinary people. There are moments of rapture and ecstasy, but that's about once every 10 years. And even then, it's a surprise to them. They didn't do anything. We've got to disabuse people of these illusions of what the Christian life is. It's a wonderful life, but it's not wonderful often in the way lots of people want it to be. It's ordinary. It's normal. It's normal. It's loving your spouse, changing diapers, going to work, doing the dishes, loving your kids. I told you once I heard Gloria Steinem speak in Melbourne, Florida. She said, "I've been married to a capitalist and I've been married to a communist, and neither one of them would take out the trash." and relationships turn on those things, don't they? They do. They do. Paul Farmer is a fellow who did amazing medical work in Haiti. He wrote a book called Mountains Beyond Mountains, and he had a friend named Tim White, a New York City real estate developer, millions of dollars. He gave Paul Farmer lots of money. And one day Tim White said to Farmer, he said, "I don't feel like my life is counting like yours. I think I should stop what I'm doing and come help you." And Paul Farmer said, No, I couldn't do this without your generosity. We couldn't do these things without your faithfulness. Every day. Every day. A couple other quick things and then I'll be done. We'll have communion. One of you sent me a video. I'm not going to show the video, but I'll tell the story. It's about a woman who worked in a meat processing plant, I don't know where. And in the afternoon, early afternoon, she went into the freezer and accidentally the door shut behind her. And I'm sure they have safety things now that keep this from happening. But in that time, she couldn't get out. And she banged on the door and yelled and screamed and all this, and nobody heard her. And then it got to be 5 o'clock and everybody left. And she's there for 5 hours, getting close to dying. And the security guard comes and opens the door, and there she is. And later when she recovers, she asked the security guard, how is it that you happened to come by and open that door? And here's what he said. He said, I've been security guard here for 35 years. You're one of a handful of people that greets me every morning. Hi, Joe, how are you? I hope you're having a good day. And says goodbye to me every evening. Most people just walk right by me as if I'm a non-entity. But you greet me every morning, and you greeted me this morning. And your greeting gives me a sense that I'm important. I have value. And you greeted me this morning, but I noticed that you didn't your normal goodbye, Joe. And so when everybody else left and you didn't leave, I thought, wonder where she is. And I went looking for you. She was doing just what a normal, healthy follower of Jesus does. That's what you do day in and day out. And I just want to say, it's been a privilege for Jan and me to know you and be honored by that. And I'll close with this. You've heard me talk too much about our daughter. She's just amazing. In fact, she and our 2 kids are going to be here next Thursday and be here on Sunday. You've heard me talk about 2001. She was going from school to an intersection, new light. Somebody ran the light. Several accidents right there at the same time. T-boned her, coma, and a long journey back. Her balance was impacted. She still has no balance. In a wheelchair, mostly. Speech was affected. But she's pretty good now. But I'm not going to talk about her. I'm going to talk about her husband, our son-in-law, Eric. They've been married 13 months. 13 months. A lot of guys would have walked away. Eric said, when I married my best friend and she's still there, I'm going to stay with her. It's normal. It's ordinary. He was raised a Midwestern farm boy. He was president of the state FFA, took a year off after high school, traveled around the state, went to Ohio State, now is a professor at Virginia Tech. Grew up a Lutheran. I imagine he never raised his hand in worship, although I like it when I do, and sometimes you do. He's just solid as a rock. And he's there. Every time they travel, he has to get out the wheelchair and help her out to the bathroom, help her get back in the car. Everything turns on changing the diapers, taking out the trash, saying, I love you. That's what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ, who walked through the grain fields and said, I know what the law says, but I know the lawgiver. Jan and I watched a movie the other night called The Words, and there's a poignant moment when the guy says, I love, my tragedy is I love words, and I love them to the point that I've lost the woman who gave me inspiration for them. And sometimes that's what happened to the Pharisees. They love these words, but they forget the God who gave the Sabbath for man and woman. And Jesus took these ordinary things called bread, wheat, and he makes them the gift of life. He took the product of a grape, gave it as a blessing. Would you pray with me? God, I'm humbled by the people in front of me, the people who've gone on before us, the people who will watch this, who are up north, who've given generously, who've given sacrificially, who roll up their sleeves, who love their kids, drop them off at preschool, pick them up, take them to soccer games, on and on and on, the stuff of life. And now to receive this gift of bread. And in these few words, of quoting Jesus, he said, "This is my body, broken for you. And this is my blood shed for you for the forgiveness of sins." They become life for us. They become the presence of the risen Christ. Ordinary stuff, extraordinary gifts. Bless each one as we receive. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.